Welcome, everyone, to the ninth episode of the Open Throne Podcast. I'm your host, Cole Houck, once again joined by my good friend, college basketball enjoyer, Landon, coming here to cover a couple more of the games we didn't cover back on Saturday, and then a couple other games we've seen, since then, Monday night games, then a game last night that surprised us on Tuesday night. How are you feeling today?
I'm feeling good. Thanks for having me back on.
Yeah, it's still a lot of good hoops to talk about. So the first game we'll get right into it because we introduced yourself last time. That wasn't too long ago. Was Illinois and UCLA. Now I don't know how much you knew about these teams going into it, but this was a roller coaster of a game. If you look at the game cast, it is just like the winning percentages up and down for both teams. UCLA was down 33-10 at one point, which was a 98% chance for Illinois to win the game. But they fought back at home, and they ended up bringing it to overtime and then winning with like 5 seconds left. I mean, it was a crazy ending. What did you think about the game?
Yeah, it was definitely a crazy game. I saw something. It was the largest comeback for in program history for UCLA, which is you know crazy in that sense. But to beat a team like Illinois is definitely big for their program. You know, I'm not sure what their stance is for the NCAA tournament, but that definitely boosted them up quite a bit. One thing that stood out to me was UCLA's sort of ability to shoot the ball, after they went down big 33-10 or whatever. They were able to shoot the ball at a pretty decent clip. And, overall it's just a really fun game to watch. That was when you think of college basketball, that's kind of like the game, ups and downs, game of runs, that sort of thing. I thought the ending with Donovan Dent was crazy, just letting a guy go all the way to the basket. But yeah, UCLA played a really decent game, balanced scoring overall. Donovan Dent had 15 assists, which is pretty crazy. But yeah, just overall fun game.
Yeah, definitely. I thought it was kind of weird looking at this box score here. UCLA has 6 guys who had double digit. There's only 6 guys that scored altogether too. Like everybody had between 10 points and 20 points. And it's actually 5 of the 6 guys had between 14 and 20. And shout out Donovan too. Like you said, he had 14 points, 15 assists, 0 turnovers is a crazy as well. Just a stat line to throw on top of that. And then Illinois had 19 assists themselves. So Donovan had nearly all of the team assists without getting any turnovers. So that was pretty cool. I want to talk about Andrej Stojakovic because I liked him a decent bit at Cal, but he kind of fell off a little bit back half the season. He has been going through it this year. He's not been playing too well. He's been playing off the bench the last couple games since he had a high ankle sprain, but he's not looked good. He pretty much won them the game himself the other day, and then has looked really bad for the most part, not shooting well, but taking a decent bit of threes like his father the last few games too. So I have issues with Stojakovic and a team that has him as a high usage. He's just not been shooting at a good clip this season so far. That's pretty much my only concern. UCLA is not very good on the road this year. A lot of teams that are in the middle of the pack for high conferences aren't too good on the road. UCLA is no different. But I think they have a pretty good chance to make the tournament. You said you're not sure like what their chances are. I don't know if it's like I think they still need to take care of business for the most part. They're not a lock by any means. But I think they have an okay chance as long as they, do what they need to for the rest of the games and then in the Big Ten tournament as well. My only problem with them is they're not a good rebounding team. I mean, this was on full display against Illinois. Illinois, to be fair, is a very, very good rebounding team. They're actually really fun to talk about analytically, but just have a little bit of concern about UCLA for their rebounding. For Illinois, they are the most analytic darling I think I've ever seen. Listen to this. So they are sixth in rebounding margin in the nation, the second in the nation in the least amount of fouls, fifth in the nation in free throw percentage, and their makes and attempts are eighth and 10th in the nation. Think about the numbers game of that. How many more shots you're going to get? How many more points you're going to get with all of those going for you? It's just it's really interesting thinking about that. Like that's why they're so good analytically and why they should be better in theory than they probably are. And then they played 9 guys the other day, which is their main rotation guys. Those 9 guys' average height was 6'8". They had like a 6'10" off the bench between their 3 guys who played, or 4 guys that played. It's a really tall lineup. They shoot threes well. It's an interesting team. Like I said, the eye test doesn't quite match what I see, but it's not too far off. And I think they could be a pretty big threat going down the stretch in the tournament.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. They're if everything's clicking for them, they can definitely put up numbers and make it far in the tournament. But going back to Stojakovic, he came over from Cal and I was really excited about him. He was making, pretty decent NIL money, and I was excited to watch him sort of on a much bigger stage at Illinois, getting, primetime games, that sort of thing. But he just hasn't I think the spotlight is too bright for him in a way. He hasn't been good at all, and, now he's coming off the bench because of his struggles and that sort of thing. So I've been kind of disappointed in him, but overall, Keaton Wagler has really stepped up for that team. He's been really good, and, like you said, they're very good analytically. They won the rebounding battle in that game by 16. So they have the pieces to go far. It's just, you know, if Stojakovic can get something rolling into the tournament, they'll be a really good team.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I think they got a lot of potential, but there's still a couple of question marks here and there. I like Wagler as a prospect more than I thought. Like, I didn't know who he was going into this year. I'm not sure if you knew much about him, but I had no clue who this guy was. He's risen a bunch, like a lot of draft boards. Now he's probably a top 7 or 8 prospects. I mean, if you get consensus from all the professionals out there, the mock drafts, he's definitely like top 10 lottery for sure, at least as of right now. So he did pretty good, better playmaker than I thought, and he's 6'6". I mean, he's all of 6'6". He looks taller there than I thought he was going to be too. So I like him. I just got to keep an eye on Illinois for the rest of the season. I mean, said they are on paper are one of, if not the best team analytically. So I think there's a pretty good chance that they do well. The next game I'm going to talk about here, this was a fun watch as well, was the Miami versus UVA game. And in full disclosure, we've seen the NC State game, the UVA NC State game that we're not going to talk about on here after this. So we also have that when we're talking about Virginia. But this is a really fun game. I mean, I thought Virginia came out swinging. They hit a lot of threes early on in this game, if I remember correctly, in the first half. And I didn't think that Miami was going to be able to keep up. I might have actually texted you that saying Miami's doesn't have the offense to keep up with this team. If this team goes to 80 or 85, they won't be able to keep up. And give credit to Miami, they did keep up pretty well, but obviously that 85 number, if that's what I said, wasn't going to cut it, right? So this was fun. But Miami plays the exact same type of basketball they always do, where it's just bully ball, getting offensive rebounds, working in the paint. I mean, that's the only reason NC State lost to Miami was just rebounding and just getting blocked and all that stuff inside on Van Leuven. So, yeah, Virginia's a really good team. Ryan Odom is a great coach. I loved him at VCU a lot. I was kind of hoping NC State got Ryan Odom. I think that looks really good as of like very recent history from last night's. But I'm, happy for Virginia they got him. I'm very happy with Will Wade too. Won't complain too much about that. Just think they play a really good style of basketball, and it's showing off a lot right now.
Yeah, this game was probably one of the best ACC matchups other than, Duke Carolina, that I've watched at least. It was a really close game. And like you said, I didn't think Miami hasn't looked good offensively or not that good, at least offensively, all year long. And so then Donaldson really showed up big, and he was able to, hit threes and make shots. And then also, I really like Malik Renew for Miami. Like you said, he's a big body, powerful inside. And, Virginia, they've sort of turned their program around, like you mentioned, from the Tony Bennett days where, you hold teams to 50 points to now they're trying to put up big numbers. Of course, last night we saw one where they were kind of slow in the first half and then pulled it away. But yeah, both coaches are really turning around their programs. Miami was, I think they were second to last in the ACC and didn't make the tournament along with State last year. Now, they're top of the league and thriving and going to go hopefully deep in the tournament. But yeah, just overall fun game.
Yeah, I mean, it's two really good teams. UVA is probably going to be a top 3 or 4 seed, depending on how they do in the ACC tournament. I wouldn't see them being any higher than 3, and I doubt they drop to 5 or 6, as well as they've done this year. I think they only have 3 losses on the year, too, so that really good record over there. And Miami, it just plays so hard. Like, I remember that State game where it was like, if I wasn't cheering for NC State, I would be having a blast watching Miami. This team they want it more than everybody else, and they somehow don't get called for fouls. That's the Duke effect. This guy, John Lucas, the coach from Miami, he was under Shire every year before taking this job. He teaches a really fun style of play for them. They won offensive rebounding battle 12-4. They won the points in the paint battle 40-3. I mean, it was just Virginia hitting a couple threes, especially down the stretch, getting out to a big lead or a lead early in the game. I think they're actually down at the half, but they just took care of business. I also want to give a special shout out to Chance Mallory, the 5'10" freshman who had 6 rebounds and led the team in rebounding. I thought that was pretty cool too.
Yeah, he's definitely a good player, definitely undersized, which is not typical of Virginia and the type of prospects they go after because usually they like bigger guards. But he's definitely come on for them, especially as of late. And going back to Jai Lucas, I was concerned for Miami going in. I thought after Larinaga they needed maybe not a young coach like that, but they needed some experience. But he's definitely proven himself as a coach, and he's in the mix with Will Wade and Odom for first year coaches in the ACC and how well they've done. And I think that'll first year young coach talent will continue on and sort of be the new effect for the rest of the ACC for teams like Boston College and Notre Dame who kind of need to flip around for their
The
program.
Georgia Techs of the world. Yeah, there's a few of them out there that are going to move off some coaches pretty soon, I'd have to imagine. See, so the next game we got now is the Tennessee Vanderbilt game. And I had watched this entire first half live, and I went back and saw highlights and stuff for the second half because there was a lot of games going on. I was busy that time of Saturday. But this was a pretty fun game to watch as well. A couple pretty high prospects in this one, too. Namely, Nate Immense, who has been really up and down this year as far as leading, the team offensively as a young freshman. He is supposed to be a project player as far as I'm concerned in the NBA and a really good defender and supposed to be able to kind of develop his offensive game down the road. Maybe he'll figure out how to shoot eventually. I was pretty underwhelmed by his defense in the first half. I won't lie. Like I thought, obviously he has the tools. I think he's like 6'10", and he can kind of facilitate the offense a little bit. So there's an interesting idea there. His off ball awareness, I had a bunch of questions about. On ball, he's got the length to be able to do good. And he's quick laterally. I understand why there's the tools there for him to be such a high prospect as he is. But I was not super impressed with him. I'm gonna watch more of Nate Mint pretty soon. But I wasn't. I think he's gonna fall if he keeps playing like this. And then for Vanderbilt, the main guy is Tyler Tanner, who was really fun to watch in the first half. I mean, this is a 6 foot point guard that does everything you want a 6 foot point guard to do. He was going off in the first half. I think he had 16 or something like that in the first half. He barely scored in the second half. Honestly, he didn't do that much, watching it again in the second, but he's really good, does a little bit of everything. Isn't a horrible defender by any means, at least at the college level, but obviously have concerns about it going to the next level being, my height essentially. So I think it's interesting. Vanderbilt's they should have won this game. They definitely should have won this game. They had it for a lot of it. I mean, it was back and forth, but I think they had the advantage in my opinion. And it just came down to Tennessee hitting shots at the ends. Rick Barnes of Tennessee is actually 13-2 against Vanderbilt since 2018. I heard somebody say that on the broadcast going in, or 12-2 going into the game. So I think he just owns Vanderbilt. I'm not sure they can do anything about this. Vanderbilt is the better team typically, but they didn't come out this last game.
Yeah, for sure. And Vanderbilt hasn't, correct me if I'm wrong, but they haven't really been a powerhouse
No.
basketball program in the past. And they've really turned their program around, like you said, with Tyler Tanner, and then also I was really high on Tyler Nickel coming over from Virginia Tech. He played at UNC also. He can really shoot the ball. I think he won like some award in high school for like most threes or something like that. But yeah, Tennessee played a really good game. They won the rebounding battle. Their guards are really big. I think Nate Immense like at least 6'8" or something like that. Gillespie's really really good. And then like you mentioned Okpara, I really like him in the center for them. But Tyler Nickel, he didn't shoot the ball that great. And that was ultimately probably what led them to lose the game. But it was definitely a fun watch, and they kind of played the same style of basketball almost, both shooting the ball pretty decently. But ultimately, Rick Barnes he's such a good coach. So we'll see what
He
they do in the
is.
tournament.
Yeah, he's one of the better coaches of this generation, I think, as well. I want to give a special shout out to the Vanderbilt coach as well. His name is Mark Byington. This is his second year there, and again, what you said was that Vanderbilt is not really known as a powerhouse school for basketball. Shout out to Vanderbilt for picking up through NIL, being better at football and basketball, the revenue and money making sports. That's pretty cool for them. I also want to talk about Akbar again. He was really solid defensively. He's still not great offensively, which kind of is actually a pretty big kind of metaphor or analogy for the entire team, I guess. They're good at rebounding. They're really solid defensively, but they're kind of thin offensively, and sometimes they'll shoot themselves out of a game or they can't perform offensively. That's a lot of what Akpara is for that team, I feel like. So I'm not super impressed with Tennessee. I don't know if they'll make it like I think they maybe overperform in the tournament because they have somebody like Rick Barnes. But like, if this team didn't make the Sweet 16, I wouldn't be shocked. I think they're probably going to end up being a 5 or 6 seed, so maybe they're actually supposed to lose before that. And then I also want to give a special shout out to Jalen Washington from, remember him at UNC last year? He had 6 blocks this game for Vanderbilt, legacy game for Jalen Washington. So that was pretty cool. I saw he had a couple in the first half. I didn't realize he got up to 6, so that was pretty cool. Shout out to him for that too.
Yeah, I feel like Tennessee, they just once they get the ball rolling in the right direction, they win 3 or 4 or 5 games in a row. They drop a, bad or, mediocre loss that they were supposed to win, which, Nate Ament's still young and he's still figuring things out, but I feel like they put a lot of trust into him and Gillespie to score the ball for that team. And ultimately down the stretch, relying on somebody like Nate Ament probably is not the best thing considering he's a young talent. So
Yeah, the inexperience of the offense, questionable offense is going to be tough down the road. I understand. You're totally right about that Tennessee team, by the way. Like they won 5 good games in a row, and then they lost to Missouri last night. We won't talk about that game because I didn't watch too much of it. Didn't really think I needed to be honest. Tennessee was favoring that game. They ended up losing. Missouri's a pretty good team too, so maybe we'll talk about them a little more for SEC tournament preview, something along those lines. But so that was all the games we had for Saturday. I mean, it was just a super fun Saturday slate. I really do think it was one of the better Saturday slates in the last few years. And I was really happy we got to see so many of those games and watch so many good hoops. Nothing too crazy happened on Sunday. Michigan State ended up beating Ohio State. They didn't look very good. You actually had said that they had a team only meeting because of that. I was poor on the eye test for the Spartans, so that doesn't shock me. And then Monday, we had a couple good games. I was not expecting this first game to be as good as it was. This was UNC playing Louisville. And you would tell me going into it that Louisville had trouble on the road. They hadn't looked too good. They won a couple games, but I think they probably have a below 500 record actually on the road for a team that doesn't have that many losses on the season as Louisville doesn't. And then Carolina's 15-0 at home, now 16-0 because they won this game. So, yeah, it was just a perfect storm for UNC. They looked pretty good. Trimble had 30 points. He hadn't scored more than 22 points all season, so shout out Trimble for that. But any team that lets Trimble score 30 deserves to lose, in my opinion. Louisville played pretty well too. I mean, they tried to come back in the game. Their offense had, even though it looks pretty dumb, their offense ended up hitting some shots, got a couple threes in there. But they didn't score for 10 minutes, late in the first half, and then probably the first 8 minutes or so in the second half. They didn't score at all. No field goals for almost 10 minutes straight. And then they couldn't stop UNC as well. Like actually, they had done what they needed to on offense to come back despite that 10 minutes of no scoring, and they couldn't stop UNC on offense. They couldn't stop Seth Trimble. I mean, Jaron Washington had a really good game. I like him, or Jared Stevenson, excuse me. I like him a lot. He's been a really good guy for them. He's really fun defensively to watch. He had a couple threes in the second half. I knew it was kind of over when I saw that. He's not the greatest offensive player, but I said I respect him a ton. Louisville's weak. Besides the guards they have, I'm not amazed with this team's depth, with this team's front court. 13 Frew is pretty good. I like him as far as a big goes. But he actually had a chance to pretty much tie this game up or win this game with the putback dunk. I don't know if you remember that. He was right there for it, and then he missed the putback. They ended up losing by 2, I think, in this game. So it's just tough. Louisville has a lot of question marks. They're pretty streaky. What did you think about this game?
yeah, I was very excited going into this game just because as a state fan I want to see UNC lose, but UNC without Caleb Wilson looked probably as good as I think they will without Wilson. Vasar played pretty decent. And then of course Trimble just played the game of his career, which, UNC, it's interesting because they just have a bunch of sort of role players. They don't really have, without Wilson, they're kind of built around Caleb Wilson. And when you take him out of the equation, it's kind of just a bunch of role players like Stevenson, like Trimble. But, it paid off. Louisville played a really bad game, in my opinion. Their offense was just setting screens for Brown and what's their other guard's name? Oh, Conwell. Brown and
Yeah.
Conwell, and seeing what they could do. But, you know, jacking up threes is probably not the best offense, especially when you can't sit down and guard on the other end. So, missing a whole bunch of threes for them was big. Louisville, actually, they started the game really well. They were up 12 or 15 or something like that. And Michael Brown played really, really well in the first little bit of the game, but then he just, I don't know if he got into foul trouble or what. I can't quite remember, but
He was just missing shots. He's got problems sometimes.
yeah, he's a very streaky shooter. Like if the ball goes in the hoop, then you know they'll win games. But if it's not, it's pretty bad. They're similar to NC State in a lot of ways, and I'm scared for Louisville in the tournament because if their guards aren't hitting, they could very well lose first round, depending on who they played.
I think they lost first round last year. I mean, they weren't nearly as good as they were this year. I think they ended up, I think it was a 7-10 or 8-9 matchup. Whatever it was, I remember where I was. I was at it's actually a golf simulator place is where I was watching it. And I thought they were going to win pretty comfortably. They ended up losing. I want to say it was 8 versus 9. They were the 8 seed, or maybe they were 9, but I thought they were going to win. They were favored. Yeah, it's exactly what you're talking about, where it's just the offense looks really poor sometimes, and they will for sure, if not more than anybody else in the nation, shoot themselves out of games, just like this one.
Yeah, and I was really excited to watch Liam McNeely coming over from Virginia. I thought he was gonna bring a big boost to their offense, but he hasn't really, at least in that Carolina game, he didn't do hardly anything. He took like 2 shots and then he missed them and basically took himself out of the game. I also think that, Pat Kelsey at Louisville, I was excited, and he has the fan base, increasing fan base and that sort of thing, but I don't think he's performed as well as he could and that sort of thing because they have a lot of talent. Michael Brown's really talented. I'm not sure where he is on draft boards, but he's up there.
He's like top 8, top 10. Yeah.
Yeah, he's really talented. So I definitely think this Louisville team should be better than what we saw at least against Carolina.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And then the other game we had on the game following this on Monday night was Houston and Kansas. Now this one could have been predictable, and I thought Kansas was going to win going into it. I didn't think it was going to happen like this. First off, man, Trey White had 23 points. If Trey White scores 23 points in any game, they can beat anybody in the nation. Like the starting five besides Trey White is too good for him to score 23 and them not beat, I said, any team, frankly. Bryson Tiller, I gave him his props last time I was on here. He's still really good. I think he's really fast for a 6'10", 6'11" forward. And I think NBA people need to look at him a little bit more. It may take a year or two in college for him to develop his offense a little bit more, but I do think he's really, really solid. And I like him for Kansas. What's interesting is that Darren Peterson didn't play all that well, but it didn't matter. They had this game locked up with about 10 minutes left, it felt like. I mean, they were probably up by 10 or 12 in the middle of the second half. What's really interesting is that for Houston, I remember you said this on the last time that Flemings and Sharp went 8 for 22 and that was probably never going to happen again. They went 7 for 28, or sorry, 8 for 28, and then they went 7 for 28 today. And now I'm a little bit worried about it. I mean, this offense, besides those two guys, first off, those two guys should not be taking that many shots, especially when they're not hitting like they weren't these last 2 games. And secondly, they have better offensive pieces. I mean, Uzan is a good piece. Tugler can do stuff if you get him down low against a smaller team. They have offensive potential, at least in the starting five, and they're just not using because they're letting Sharp and Flemings take dumb shots or weird looking shots, especially Flemings. I mean, he's a really great player. He's very fast, but he takes some shots that I kind of look at him a little bit crazy. And then I have depth concerns. I'm not worried about this team as far as like playoff time. I think we may have said this before. I don't think they're deep enough to go on to make it to the final or win the championship just because of having to run their guys down until somebody gets hurt or they get really tired by the end. And then I think they're going to kill Colorado. I think they've dropped 3 straight, right? And now they're playing Colorado at home. I don't see where they don't beat Colorado by 25 points, to be honest. I think it's going to be a bad day to be a Buffaloes fan. What did you think about this game on Monday?
Yeah, I was honestly expecting Houston to beat Kansas. I might have touched on this last podcast, but I'm not too high on Kansas, especially with all the questions surrounding, Darren Peterson and that sort of thing. But Houston really struggled to shoot the ball. I think they finished shooting 20% from 3 or something like that. So it was definitely a rough shooting game for them. But, ultimately that's what it came down to. And Kansas was sort of lucky in a way that Houston didn't shoot the ball well. But, ultimately Kansas is finding ways to win games, and that's what it takes down the stretch. Without Peterson and everything surrounding him, you don't know what his future looks like. And having guys like Badunga and some of the other guys are able to sort of take over for that missing piece. And we'll see how far they get in the tournament, but they're definitely a fun team to watch, especially when Peterson is playing his full minutes.
Yeah, that's a big if. I think I said before, I believe in Kansas. I know that it seems like there's something missing, and obviously it's tough to put your faith in somebody as young as Peterson to take such a high, offensive usage whenever it comes down to hitting shots in the tournament. But I have faith in them. I think the Jayhawks would do pretty good. I trust Bill Self. I feel like I have to. He's earned my trust. So the last game we got on here was one from last night. There's a few good games on last night. One really bad game that I don't want to talk about from last night, but the one we are going to talk about is a really late start, and that's the BYU UCF game. Now, I had watched a little bit of this first half. It started at 11:30, so I just I can't make that work, to be honest. I got school the next day, stuff like that. But I was I was surprised that this result was like this, and then I thought about it a little more and looked at the stats after and said, okay, never mind. It does kind of make sense. BYU had just beat Iowa State, right? So they're kind of coming down from that. I mean, it's a pretty normal spot to think you're better than you are and not start out too good, which is exactly what happened. I think it was like 14-4, 16-4 early, and UCF just was hitting shots. They have a surprisingly good team. I'm going to talk about UCF a little bit here. First off, Jordan Burks is a 6'9". I think he may be a senior. I don't remember what year he is, but 6'9" forward. He's been shooting 40% on the entire year. He hit three threes within the first 7 minutes. I think he finished with four, maybe five. And I think he'll be in the NBA someday just because of his size. He's built pretty strong and he can shoot 40%. You like that in the NBA. They had 11 threes at the half. So the game was pretty much over at halftime. At one point, UCF was up by 36 points. I mean, they only won by 13, but they were up by 36 with like 11 minutes left in the game. This thing was super over, despite it being in Provo. The broadcast had mentioned Dibansa being a secondary point guard. I don't know what game they were watching. I haven't thought of him as a secondary point guard the entire time. And today he had 3 turnovers and no assists. Like they actually said it after he had faked the pass and shot went up and finished a layup, which isn't, it's kind of point guard-esque. But if you watch the rest of the game or how he's been doing this season, it doesn't feel like that makes sense to say. Then lastly, Themus Folks, I think is how you say his first name. They showed up a stat that said he accounts for 37% of UCF's points, which is pretty cool. That's a lot. He averages 7 assists a game. He's from Winston-Salem, and he's actually played for 4 teams. He shoots 45% from deep, and that kind of is a good microcosm for the entire UCF team that I wanted to get into. So UCF is really interesting because I know of them to be a high-scoring team, but they don't play amazingly fast. Looking at their numbers here, they are 55th in the nation in field goal percentage. They're 84th in effective field goal percentage, and they're 28th in three-point percentage. So the way effective percentage works, I'm pretty sure, is that it kind of takes into account twos and threes percentage-wise, and then it also takes into account the volume of twos and threes that you take. There's no reason that UCF should be 55th in the nation in percentage, just overall, and 28th in three-point percentage, but 84th in effective field goal percentage. That means they're not taking enough threes, and this is exactly what happened in this game. They had hit 11 threes in the first half, hit 14 on the day, and yet had taken less threes than BYU did, who lost this game. They were down by 36. I understand to an extent that BYU needed to score, but there's no world where you hit 11 threes in the first half and take less threes than the other team. Like keep shooting, especially when you're 28th in the nation. They shoot 37.5% on the year. They need to shoot more threes. It's right there in front of them, and I really don't know why they don't. Because I think if they do, they could be a really dangerous team in March, which I think they've almost secured their spots in the tournament. I think as long as they win out, win the games they're supposed to and lose only a couple games and they don't choke it, they probably will be a 10 seed and have a pretty good chance, depending on if they're shooting a lot in the tournament, to maybe make the Sweet 16 on a surprise run.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. After watching, the highlights of this game, I was surprised, on their defense. They played really good defense, shut them down. I think the first play of the game, they got a steal, and that kind of set the tone for the rest of the game. Ultimately the score didn't reflect how well UCF played. They were up, what was it, 52-28 at halftime. So that was, the game was basically over at that point. But I have my concerns for BYU. Debansa played a pretty good game, 29 points. I mean, you can't ask a guy to go score 50 points or 40 points for you, especially in college. But he's going to give you 25 plus a night. It's just whether or not their, secondary players can step up and score, which I believe Robert Wright had a pretty decent game from what I can remember. But other than that, no one really did much aside from them. And if they did, it was sort of garbage time scoring. But yeah, I mean, UCF looked really good. They had a kid out who's one of their best players, Riley Cugwell, I think is his name. He averages like 14 points a game, I think it is. Um, and yeah, it was just complete domination by them, especially at BYU is really impressive.
Yeah, it's tough to win
Um,
over there.
yeah, and I'm if BYU if they don't find something offensively, I think they can definitely get upset pretty early by a hot team, depending on what seed they get to. And ultimately, UCF was able to win honestly because they were able to set the tone early. Coming into BYU is a tough environment, and um, you know, making sure that energy is high and that sort of thing definitely allowed them to win. They were also able to shoot the ball really well, like you mentioned. So that was. I wish I could have watched that game because it would have been a fun watch.
No, that makes sense. I agree with all that. Another thing about last night, we'll get off this pretty soon. We don't talk about this game much, but I want to give a special shout out to the Baylor Bears almost beating Arizona. They ended up losing by 7, but this was like a one possession game with probably about 30 or 40 seconds left. They just missed a couple of shots, got free throws. You know how that goes. This team is 14-14, is 4-11 in the Big 12, and still has a chance to make the tournament, relatively speaking. Like that I just wanted to give a shout out to them. They're a really good team despite their record, and it is exactly why I think the Big 12 is the best conference, maybe even noticeably the best conference, is because you have the middle of the pack depth teams like that that can win on, they lose in their conference because they beat up on each other so much, but they were really good out of conference, meaning that they just shows the strength of the Big 12. I just wanted to give a special shout out to the Baylor Bears and the Big 12 as a whole.
Even though they lost by 7 points, it was definitely I caught the end of that game, and it was definitely a really close game. It came down to I think they missed like 4 free throws or something down the stretch, which you can't win too many games, especially if it's a 1 or 2 point game. But yeah, I like the pieces that they have. I really like Cameron Carr and their other Tunde.
I can't say his name. Don't you shouldn't even try it. I have no idea what I gotta say that guy's name.
Yeah, but he's really good. I like both of them, and um, it'll be interesting to watch a team like that because they don't have much to lose, but they can definitely play ball. So we'll see what they do, especially in their conference tournament. I think they can definitely pull some upsets off.
Do you think that guy's on the hot seat? I don't know their coach or how long he's been there, but if you look only at the record, Baylor's used to winning more than a 14-14 season. That's really far down compared to what they've had even the last, entire decade pretty much. I have concerns for that coach if he has another season like this, because last season was also pretty disappointing, wasn't it?
Yeah, last season they had who did they have last season? They had Edgecombe, right? But Scott Drew, he's definitely a good coach. I just think that it's hard as Baylor. I believe that they're a private school, I want to say. So, they're having trouble getting money in for NIL and that sort of thing. So they're kind of having to put all their money on 1 or 2 players and can't really build a roster. Um, competing against some of these other schools that have plenty of money to build depth out and that sort of thing. But and I think that's what we see this year. They have kind of 2 main players, and then the rest are just kind of like roster fillers almost.
Yeah, that's pretty much exactly what it is. I mean, you're totally right about that. They've just been disappointing the last few years. They've really struggled in Big 12 play. They had a couple quad one games, a quad one win going into Big 12 as well. And I think they're 4-11 since conference play has started. They also lost to Louisville on a neutral site as well, so that's a tough game. I mean, they have a really tough schedule. Give them credit for that. That's the reason that they're so high, despite being 14-14. I just think I don't know, man. I do wonder about this coach and what his chances are of staying there. I'm just putting it out there. We'll see. So that's all we have for the main games. I wanted to give out a couple predictions as well for the games coming on later this week. First off, tonight we got UConn versus St. John's. This is exactly what you were asking for the other day. Was UConn playing a real team, like a real opponent? It is at home, but you said they had lost to St. John's at St. John's early in the season. How do you think that game's going to go tonight?
Yeah, so I think this game is going to be a really good game. Like you said, St. John's won the first matchup by, I believe it was 8 or 9, and Ian Jackson, former Carolina guy, is coming back from injury. But I think that UConn's going to bounce back from that first matchup loss. It's at UConn. I don't think Dan Hurley will let them lose twice to the same team in the same season. He's just such a good coach. But yeah, I definitely think UConn will get this game done.
I think so too. It's gonna be fun to see Rick Pitino and Dan Hurley go at it. I mean, that every time they play since Pitino's been at St. John's, it's been a pretty good game. But I also like UConn to win this game pretty like maybe even by 8 or 10 points. I think they're just gonna want to get revenge. Dan Hurley too good of a team to lose at home and lose twice to the same team. And I think it's gonna be another balanced attack. I do want to see that Mullins guy. I want to see him do better, Braylon Mullins, because I have not been too impressed with him, and he's pretty high on draft boards too. So I'll be watching that game looking for him specifically tonight. The next game we have is on Thursday night. There's actually a bunch of really good games Wednesday, Thursday, or at least one good game, ranked matchup versus ranked matchup. Wednesday night, Thursday night, Friday night. They're doing this really good right now in the college basketball world. This one is going to be Michigan State at Purdue. And I think this one's gonna be interesting because Michigan State just had that team, the players only meeting. They're worried about, even though they're winning. Well, they had been about 500 before that, but they won that game. Not look too good. I think they have. I think they're going to win this game. I don't necessarily believe in Purdue. I think they have a pretty similar product every single year. I think you're the one who said that, where it's like they're just always kind of Purdue. Some years they have Zach Edey, some years they don't. So it's just we'll see what happens. But I like the Spartans to win this one. Probably as an underdog, if I had to guess. Maybe, 1 or 2 point win. Just real close game throughout, but maybe they're winning for a lot of it, or they're losing, but it's close the entire game, and they end up, hitting a couple shots down the stretch, taking care of business at the end.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a tough matchup going into Purdue. That's a tough environment over there. They have a great student section, that sort of thing. But I'm right there with you. I think the players only meeting that Michigan State had after that Ohio State game will definitely light a fire underneath them and hopefully make them play like they're supposed to. That Ohio State game was it's kind of hard to watch because Ohio State's really mid and Michigan State's a really good team. But I definitely think that Michigan State will pull off probably a close one. I don't think it'll be a blowout by either team, but I would like to see Michigan State win. It's definitely has an implication on the Big Ten tournament because I think Purdue's fourth and Michigan State's fifth, but they're like tied. So
Yeah, them
um,
and Nebraska both. They're all three tied right now for 3 through 5.
yeah, it has big implication on double bye and that sort of thing for Big Ten tournament. So it'll be a fun game to watch. And like you said, honestly, I've never seen college basketball games, this good go Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and into the weekend. Usually it's just a Tuesday, Wednesday, midweek slate, and then, have a little bit of a break till Saturday. But I really like what they're doing leading up to March. So
Yeah. Yeah, I did too. And just putting this together with the out of conference games as well. It's been really fun. It's been easy to tune into games this time of year. Now that college football is done, I thought I was going to watch a ton of NBA, which I'm still watching good professional hoops, but it has been a lot of fun diving into these games. They've constantly had good games. They got a top 10, top 15 matchup every night of the week if I wanted to watch one at 7 or 8 or 9 o'clock at night. So that's I can't ask for more. Really, really excited about this. The last one we got here is on Friday, and this is one that I am really excited to see. This is Michigan versus Illinois, and this is like the ultimate test for Illinois because the way Illinois profiles, I think I talked about this already today, was that they do good at pretty much everything. The only thing they're not so good at is turnovers, which is how they lost that UCLA game. They had, 5 or 6 more turnovers, I'm pretty sure, than UCLA did. Michigan is not that good at turnovers. That is the one thing Michigan's not good at too. So they profile as very similar teams. If Illinois is legit, like I think that they should be, they need to win this game. They need to take care of business. I really want to see how Keaton Wagler looks. I think he has potential to go off against the Michigan guards too because they have a lot of good bigs. So maybe if he has a good game on the perimeter, he can win this for him. It's gonna be a lot of fun to watch. I'm for sure watching this one live. Really excited to see it. I'm leaning towards Illinois because I think they need to win games like this, and this is again the ultimate test for them. Essentially, they have a pretty good chance to do it. This is not a team that can take advantage of their weaknesses like other teams might be able to. So I'm gonna lean Illinois, but it's gonna be really close. And again, just can't speak enough about how excited I am to watch this one.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I'm really excited to watch this game. I was researching Illinois a little bit, and out of their 6 losses, 4 have been at home, which I was surprised about because they usually have a pretty decent environment there. And after their game against UCLA, I think it was, they could definitely use a bounce back win, especially against a team like Michigan. And it'll be a fun matchup. Yaxel versus Keaton Wagler. I'm pretty sure Cadeau played pretty good last game, so he had his bounce back game. So it'll be a really fun game. But I'm leaning towards Michigan a little bit, just because of everything, and I think that Michigan's a slightly better team, but you never know. Illinois is at home, so they they could have the advantage. It's just whether or not kids like Stojakovic and Wagler, if they want to play well or not. So I'm slightly leaning towards Michigan in that game.
Yeah, that's fair. Like I said, I'm just really excited to see it. I think it's gonna be a really good game. I don't really see a world where it's a blowout either way. Like I think these two teams are really even on a lot of fronts. They're both really tall. They both do a lot of everything right. They both can't really get turnovers. So that'll just be should be a relatively clean game because they don't really go for turnovers. I could eat my words on that because they don't, force turnovers either. So, it's just we'll see what happens. I'm excited to watch it.
Yeah, that I feel like that's one of those games where it might have could could even be like a Sweet 16 matchup, Elite 8 matchup.
Yeah,
Both of those teams are really fun to watch, and if everything's clicking, I could see a high scoring game between them. They usually shoot the ball pretty well. Of course, there's off nights, but yeah, I'm looking forward to that game definitely for sure.
yeah, definitely. All right, well, that's all we have for today's episode. Thanks again for listening. Please like and subscribe on the podcast. We'll get back to you really soon with more Hoops Talk.